All right, like I said, trying to wrap all this up, and as I said, get back on the pathway. The pathway leads us back to Colorado, where all this got started. There's a certain degree of irony to that, and that wasn't exactly how I thought of it when we planned this out, but it happens to work out really well that way. Main reason that we have Colorado speaking here today is, like I said, Colorado has dealt with this longer than anybody else. And we also felt that because of that, they probably have the most experience and the most to say about it, and can probably, as I said before, we've learned lots of things that we've done right and lots of things that we've done wrong, and they probably can tell us more about it than anybody else. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to bring Wayne East to us today from Colorado, he is the agriculture liaison, which deals with dealing between agriculture and wildlife. Catherine, you'll be glad to know that these people exist. And a great part of his job is in the herd planning of dealing with positive herds. And I think he's going to give us a little bit of insight to how Colorado does this, and hopefully give us a few pointers on how we might do this if we start doing this on our own. So with that, I will turn the mic over to Wayne East, and he can tell us all the good things about Colorado. And just because of bad faith, he gets to stay with us for an extra day too. So he's here all day tomorrow as well. So.
Now I gotta try to figure out all this technology here. What do I just right or left click here and it'll go on? Hey! And I think we can probably leave the lights on. I don't know that any of these are going to be any easier to see with the lights off, but I'm just going to really quickly go over the history, at least as far as the wild animals, and I'll go into some maps, and then I'll start with the alternative livestock aspect of it. We call it alternative livestock in Colorado. It's mostly elk and fallow deer. We already talked about when it was found there, and on behalf of my fellow CSU alum, you're welcome. So in the 70s it was identified as a TSE, late 90s was when it really started to hit the press in Colorado. That was when there was a lot of emphasis put on it, and we all know what's in the media is 100% accurate all the time. But that was really when it started to come up in Colorado. Also came under scrutiny with the alternative livestock facilities. As far as where we're at today, or at least as of 2012, 2014, this is the most recent map I've got. This is for mule deer with the wild animals. You can see it's pretty widespread in the state of Colorado. The darker is the higher prevalence. The darkest is over 10% prevalence. We were talking earlier about how it tends to follow some rivers. This is the South Platte River. It's also a pretty highly populated area with our mule deer. Over here along what we call the Front Range. I-25 goes right here, for those of you not familiar with Colorado. It's right along the Front Range. Over here is all the mountains. It's very heavy here up in the Boulder area. Down here, Colorado Springs, this is Denver to orient you. Colorado Springs is the second most populated city in the state. In the Front Range area, that's also very highly infected. And then this, you'll notice in the next slide as well, is this is the northwest part. This is one of the highest areas of density as far as the populations of both mule deer and elk in the state. While I'm on the deer slide, I'm going to try to not keep looking at that screen and look at this one over here. We have had a new one pop over in here that's not on this map, and we've had a new one pop over in here that's not on this map. So I know at least those two areas are going to be shaded when these next maps come through here. Going with the elk. Elk used to be a plains species. Now they're mostly in the mountains, so we obviously don't have a lot of animals out here on the eastern plains. But you'll notice some of the same areas are the heaviest infected areas in elk as well. This is the Front Range over by Colorado Springs, and then this is that northwest area, which, by the way, happens to be the area that this ranch that Nick was talking about is located in this part of the state. So it's a heavily infected area outside the fence as well. So now let's get over to the captive service side of things. In 1994 is when it was officially moved over from Colorado Parks and Wildlife to the Department of Agriculture. This came about because industry was lobbying legislature to get out from under Parks and Wildlife and be recognized as a livestock. That was that officially took place in 1994. Again, in the late 90s, this was really when it was starting to get a lot of emphasis, was when we were noticing how widespread it was. And obviously there was a lot of blame placed there on the alternative livestock facilities in the state of Colorado. Currently we have 61 alternative livestock facilities in the state. I mentioned that most of them are elk, 57 of them are elk only. We have 3 mixed herds that have fallow deer as well as elk, and then we have 1 that's fallow deer only. We do still have 2 facilities that are grandfathered in with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. One of those has elk and mule deer. That one's down here. And then they have one that's got bighorn sheep on it as well. I'm not really familiar with that facility. Getting into the rules and regulations that we have, I guess it's a little bit different than Wisconsin. We require that all deaths must be sampled for any reason. Any animal over 12 months must be submitted for testing. We're fortunate that we have a lab in state, Colorado State University. That's one of the recognized facilities there, and this does include the OBEX and the retropharyngeal lymph node. However, one thing that's a little bit different is that we allow facility personnel to go ahead and collect their own samples. We don't have a certification program like Wisconsin has. We do go out and train them. We've got field veterinary medical officers that go out and train them, and we'll provide touch-up refresher courses or whatever, since there's a fair amount of turnover with ranch staff. So that's one thing that's a little different than what we have, or that some other states and jurisdictions have. And we do still have those field veterinarians out there that if the ranch isn't comfortable collecting those samples, we can still do it for them. So what happens if a facility does test positive? Do we as a state agency go in there and shut them down? And that's absolutely not what we want to do. The Colorado Department of Agriculture wants to promote and support agricultural entrepreneurship, and within reason we will work with these facilities that do turn positive. So out of the 61 alternative livestock facilities we have in Colorado, only 3 of them are positive. And when you think back to that map to see how widespread it is in the state, I think it's a testament to the good biosecurity, getting back to the earlier presentation that we had, and the good management of the ranch owners there, that we only have 3 positives right now. So if one does come positive, we quarantine them, there's no movement in, no movement out. And then while that's in place, we will build, as Harvey said, we build a herd plan. And that's a joint document that we draft, Colorado Parks and Wildlife helps, and then we also draft that with the ranch ownership. Sometimes they'll get an attorney involved there as well. And it lays out things that are pretty much already in the rule, like fencing, testing requirements, but it'll also talk about things like proper disposal of carcasses, the potential to still import shooter bulls, and that's an important point I'll get back to. And just so you know, all of our herd plans are good for 5 years following the last positive, so it's a rolling date. If you have another positive come up, if you have one today, it's 5 days or 5 years from today. You get another one in September, then obviously it's five years from that. But I did want to mention that we do still allow, with the herd plan, if it's in the herd plan, we still allow positive facilities to import shooter bulls so that they can continue their business. And one of those facilities is the one that Nick was talking about. That's their bread and butter, is bringing in those shooter bulls. It's a shooting ranch, or it's a hunting ranch. So we do still allow them to do that. And there's some stipulations on that, but as long as they're compliant and trying to do a good job with everything else, we will, as Dr. Rohr, my boss, says, we reward good behavior. In the past, the herd plans also included things like the BMPs, best management practices, which if followed to a letter could potentially help reduce the incidence and spread of CWD. However, these BMPs are very difficult for us as a government agency to monitor and enforce. So now we are less inclined to put those in the BMPs, and right now we're actually rewriting these BMP, or the herd plan, because those herd plans are getting a little outdated right now, so we're in the process of rewriting those, and we're less inclined to include BMPs in that. The good news is we've had 2 premises complete their herd plans. So they were positive, and now they've had 60 months of CWD-free status. So they are off the herd plan, so there is light at the end of the tunnel for some facilities. This one that Nick was talking about, I think, is so heavily infected. I don't know if that'll ever happen there, but we have had 2 go off of a herd plan. So I think that's really good news. We've had others that came positive and they depopped and either sold their ranch or got into cattle or bison or something else. But I did want to let you know that we have had 2 successful ranches come off of a herd plan. Just for your information, we had only 1 new positive come up last year. person had 2 animals, it was a personal meat herd, and they killed one of the last 2, first time they'd ever had a positive, so they did go ahead and depop by 1 animal. So I think one of the big things that people have asked about here is the partnership with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. In the past, as you can imagine, there's been some challenges and the relationship has been strained. There's been a lot of finger pointing. I think that probably is synonymous with a lot of other jurisdictions. But we have been dealing with this for over 50 years. And I think that that's one of the advantages that we've got. Now, sound science and reason tend to rule the day. Another thing that has helped us is we've had some personnel changeovers. Some of the old timers, if you will, were really ingrained and in their silos, and heard that mentioned earlier. And they didn't really want to work together. They just really wanted to blame the other person. And that's both sides. I can't say that our agency was innocent from that as well. I never met my predecessor, but from what I understand, he had no love for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Really what the foundation was is Dr. Moore, my boss, the state veterinarian, and Mike Miller have always had a really good working relationship, especially when it comes to this topic. Obviously, they work on all kinds of other things. Bighorn sheep and domestic sheep is another big issue that's contentious, but they've always had a really good working relationship, and that was kind of the foundation. Then about 3 years ago, I mentioned my predecessor. All that individual did was predator and rodent control, which is another thing that I also manage, but Dr. Moore went and took and reallocated that position to create the Ag Wildlife Liaison, which is the position I now have. And one of the things I was set out, or they set me out to do, is to start to build up that relationship. A little bit of history about me and my family. My father worked for the Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Back then I was a division of wildlife for 36 years. I grew up in the wildlife family, so to speak. My undergrad's in wildlife biology. I've worked in that industry pretty much my whole life. So I like to think that I've had a little bit to offer with building that relationship as well. And then lastly, the 2 heads of the agencies, the Commissioner of Agriculture, he came on about 2 years ago, and the head of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Bob Broscheid, he's been around for about 3.5 years. Those 2 guys get along really well, and it wasn't always that way. When our Commissioner of Agriculture came in, he had some run-ins with that agency. So he did not come in with a really good view of Colorado Parks and Wildlife, but those 2 have built an excellent relationship. And now I've heard it said that the relationship between our 2 agencies is better than it's ever been, from the ground all the way up. So how is it that we do partner together? Well, one thing is any movement of alternative livestock is co-approved with Colorado Parks and Wildlife. For those of you that have tried to move animals in, you probably are familiar with Trish. She's our admin in our office. She's the one that handles all of that paperwork. And so she's the first one that sees it, and she takes those directly to Dr. Rohr. When he signs off on it, we then CC Mike Miller, and within 24 hours we get his thumbs up on that. So that's one way that we partner with them. As I mentioned earlier, they also will support import of shooter bulls so that these hunting ranches can continue to survive and thrive, even if they have chronic wasting disease. And even for those facilities that don't have good surveillance, we generally want to see 95% surveillance over the last 5 years, 60 months. So we ask 100%, but we understand predation happens. We're talking about finding animals in the spring when the thaw. We understand that you're not going to get 100% out there, but we ask for 95%. So we generally want to see that if we're going to be allowing movement in, just to make sure that we've got a good confidence that we're not bringing anything in as far as chronic wasting disease or other diseases. But even when they don't have a good surveillance rate there, they're still, Mike Miller and Dr. Rohr are still willing to work together. Case in point, recently we just had a facility that wanted to swap a fallow deer with another facility that had, I think they were giving three bull elk for 1 fallow deer. Neither one of them had good surveillance. But we still didn't want to just say, no, we can't do that. So we got together and we said, well, we'll approve this with rectal biopsy. For us, it was good enough. So we're still willing to work with pretty much anybody out there so that they can continue on with their business. So I've talked a little bit about the history and kind of a snapshot. You got to see the prevalence in the wild and 3 facilities and the alternative livestock side of things. Now looking forward to the future, I'm going to hit a little bit on this project as well as some other things that Nick talked about. I won't go into too much detail as far as the research, but the first aspect of it is new technology. Under Dr. Rohr's leadership, I like to consider us as early adopters when it comes to technology. We're really good as far as using databases for traceability. In fact, we just had South Dakota, I think it was TB in cattle. We found out about some of their exposed animals before they did, just because of the detail that we've got with our database. So that's just one example, but getting over here with the elk, the first aspect that we're looking at is, and I think he was talking about, Dr. Haley was talking about how they do an annual inventory. Their inventory was really bad before we started this last year. I was able to go up there and help out last year. So the first thing that we looked at was using ultra high frequency tags. I'm not sure how many of you have seen these, but Colorado right now, we require 3 forms of ID. There's a ranch tag, which is a visible tag like this, a USDA bright tag. I didn't bring one of those, but you're probably familiar with those. I've got a picture of one of those in the next few slides. And then a tattoo. A lot of redundancy, 3 different forms of ID on there. The hope is that this can serve as a ranch tag, as well as the bright tag, the USDA official tag. But we wanted to see how well these would work, the technology, but the other thing we really wanted to know was about retention. Well, after a year, 100% retention on these. Bright tags, I think we had about 92% or something like that fell out. Or 22% retentions, 8% fell out. So that's the really good news. Now, in full disclosure, this wasn't 100% effective as far as the ultra high frequency of the technology aspect of it, being able to read this from a long ways off. Just to tell you a little about it, right here we've got, looks kind of like a radar gun. You can shoot this at individual animals, maybe up to 20 feet in optimum conditions. And then the other thing is, if you can see these are panel readers. There's 2 panel readers. As these elk would come in, they'd come in from your right, and it would read from the front. And then they would take a 90-degree turn, and if maybe they were behind another animal or for some reason it wasn't working that angle, now it's reading it from behind, because they're now facing towards the left. You can set these up at choke points, or if you had some kind of power source out there at a water source or something, you could also set this out there to see which animals are moving around. So that's just one aspect that we're looking at. In case you haven't seen it, this is a button tag or an RFID tag. This requires a wand. It's almost like when you chip a cat or a dog. I joke with the text, it looks like it's a lightsaber that you just got to wave over this. But this has also got really good retention. So that's another thing you can look at. By the way, if you haven't seen either one of these, I'll be happy to pass this around a little bit later. So hopefully, I think down the road, all the glitches, any new technology, there's glitches, and down the road, it'll get worked out. I mean, just the way the technology is moving, this thing's way more powerful than the desktop computer I had back in college. So it's amazing how fast technology is moving. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few years you're going to be able to look at your inventory from a satellite. Drones, high enough, that'll probably be the next step. I mean, seriously, people laugh, but you don't want them too low, so they'll scare everything. In fact, we just had a fundraiser, and somebody decided to take their drone out ski journeying, or they're pulling skiers behind a draft horse. Somebody went down there and scared the horse, and the horse went off into the crowd and injured 3 people. So drones are great, just fly them high. So we already talked about this, or Dr. Haley talked about the research. This is the next thing that we're looking to try to take things into the future. He looked at he already mentioned all these samples, the blood. The one I don't think he had on there was a lymph node aspirates. I don't think that one was feasible either. And fecal samples, the tissue samples, and saliva, all for animal organ testing. We're just trying to look at anything we can to try to move this into a less invasive but effective animal organ test. And he already talked about the genetic aspect of things, so I'm not going to get into that much. For those of you that don't know what I'm talking about when I say a bright tag, this is the metal clip right here. So one of the next things we're looking at, and it's not final yet, it's going through the process right now, is we've created a new rule that's going to save some money for our producers out there, and this came about from the industry. So what this rule is going to do is it's going to allow anybody that imports animals, this is both inside, intrastate, and interstate. If you import an animal and that animal dies within 12 months, you still have to collect your samples, but you can store them. You don't have to send them in. So that's going to save the money as far as the testing costs. You have to save them for 3 years. If you pop CWD positive from either your other testing from any ranch born or from any animal that was imported and died more than 12 months, or if it pops positive at the premises of origin, then you have to submit all of those samples that you've stored. So it's a little bit of a gamble. You could all of a sudden have a $10,000 or $20,000 fee because you're submitting 3 years worth of samples, but we haven't had that come up yet. And we think that this is just a good way to reward, again, as Dr. Ward would say, good behavior. By the way, another example of the relationship that we have with Parks and Wildlife, when we proposed this rule, it went all the way up to the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission. I was there that day. We didn't get a single question from them. That's just how good the relationship is. It was an instantaneous, unanimous support for this rule, and we got a letter from the chairman of that commission, which again, just goes to the relationship. I'm trying to catch you up on time here. So my last slide, I was trying to think about what you guys wanted most from me coming up here, and my guess was just trying to look at whatever lessons we have on the alternative livestock side of things that maybe you could take from this. I wish I had some kind of a magical formula to tell you how to build this great relationship, but a lot of that is just having the right people there and just being open-minded to work together. And as Harvey said, being here is a great first step, and just interacting face-to-face, I think, is a great way to do it too, because it's one thing when you can spout off in an email, but it's a lot better to try to build a relationship and communicate face-to-face. But the first lesson I had on here is that hunt parks can operate even with chronic wasting disease. We're seeing that in Colorado, and as long as the government agencies are allowing them to continue their practices, which we're allowing them to bring in shooter bulls, they can still survive. And then CWD and alternative livestock facilities can be managed as long as you have those good relationships. I know others have talked about that as well, and I'm not going to dwell on that too much. But when you have good working relationships, good things can be accomplished. And that's all I have today.
Questions? Diane, got a microphone for Diane, please.
Hi, I just have one question. When you said that they had to, after the 3 years, if the source was positive or whatever, do they just have to submit the samples in question, or everything they got in the freezer?
They would have to submit everything that they had stored, just because we want to know if it had spread during that time that it had been there. So if all of a sudden it pops the herd of origin, and nothing showed up at this ranch, we know that there was at least some exposure, so they're going to have to submit everything.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that you reward good behavior, but if you could just, in kind of point form, just tell us why you've only got 3 of 61 facilities in CWD-infested Colorado positive.
The only thing I can think of is, as I said, I think it's really good biosecurity from those range managers.
Can you elaborate on that biosecurity? What do you think is working? Sorry. Ian was going to say it anyway. Oh, I'm channeling Ian. Oh my God.
We knew you'd come around to the dark side eventually.
You're never too old to learn.
Well, and a lot of it was talked about earlier when they were talking about cleaning your trailers, cleaning your boots, and when we go into these facilities. Last year when I was there with Nick, everything stayed behind. I mean, all the clothes, everything I had, he was the same way. I mean, we don't do anything on that. And they're trying to do the same thing, and especially with like avian influenza, we're really looking at that. That's a good way to look at how biosecurity can work, washing mud off the trucks and not taking equipment off. I think that they're doing a lot of that. I really don't know why there hasn't been water transmission. I mean, we didn't talk about how this can go airborne. I know there's been research on that as well. So I really don't know what's stopping from all that happening. Maybe we just got the sand there. I don't know. It's called the Rocky Mountains for a reason. There's a lot of rocks there. Maybe there's not a lot of clay up in the mountains. I don't really know as far as the environmental contamination goes, but Andy Oscaraga, which I think a lot of you know, is really our biggest importer, and he's very good on doing the biosecurity. In fact, he's got at least 2 herds that I know of. One he calls his clean herd. That's his local herd. There's never been anything in that's come from out of state there. And when he brings something else in, he's got that at a totally different facility. So he's really good about monitoring that. The other thing is just having our traceability. As soon as we know something came up, we go back and we trace everything out. And because of our technology, I mean, it can be done like that. So we try to nip that in the bud as fast as we can. But as far as environmental, I really don't know what's stopping it there. One thing, getting back to one of the maps, the mule deer map, that was showing you that one of the areas on there that has not been shaded yet, because this map is from 2014, most of our facilities are in the southwest part of the state. That's the first positive we've had in the southwest part of the state in the wild. So that is going to cause some concern for your industry, because now we know for sure, at least in one area in the southwest part of the state, that it's in the wild.
Look at that map that you showed there, you sort of showed that the CVD was prevalent along the river system. How do you guys feel about your wild populations there? Like, are they considered to be good after 50 years of running there, or what's your opinion on that? Or do you know?
You know, that'd be a question for Mike Miller. I'm not really sure what's going on with the deer populations. I don't know if it's shown an impact after these decades. I really don't know.
Just, I'm not familiar with the farms down there, but do they grow, are they larger farms, and would they potentially harvest their own hay and feed from inside the fence versus outside? I'm just wondering.
Do you know what they do at that research facility, Nick? Do they bring their feed in?
Which one? Which facility?
The one where we're doing our large scale study at.
They have significant pasture, but they do import,
Hay.
yeah, in the winter time. But they already have CWD, but I mean, I know where you're going. Maybe these plain places aren't importing. I would guess that some of them are, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would assume that some of them have to do that, because some of the facilities are pretty small. That one is a total 5,000 acres they own. I think 3,500 or 4,000 is fenced. But I know they've got hay there. I just didn't know what the source of that hay is.
Once they've been detected positive and they work through their 5 years and they're through their hunt plan, are they then allowed to move, those two operations you've talked about, are they allowed to move out to other, well, they are,
Yeah.
throughout the state. So once they're past 5 years, there's no concern with them at all.
Well, as far as we're concerned, they're approved. If the facility that's bringing animals in and they still have concerns, even though it's been 5 years of no positives, you know, that's their prerogative. But as far as we're concerned, you're completely off all restrictions.
Did they receive their federal status back, or do you know?
You know, I'm not really sure, to be honest with you.
Okay, I think we'll cut this part of it off, cut this off here. Thanks, Wayne. Okay, what we will do now is we'll take about a 5-minute break, not a very long one, or quickly. And what I would like all of the speakers to convene, and I'm going to designate Gordon's table because he's by himself and I don't have to relocate everybody to do it. And we will have a short roundtable discussion where maybe a little bit of open season. You get to ask some more leading questions. Maybe catch something that you forgot to ask about the first time around, or start a little scrap. You want to go against the other, whatever you guys want to do. It's open, just an open table.